So welcome back, everybody. It's very exciting. We're looking forward, B'ez Hashem, to conclude the entire Likutei Amarim. We say exciting, it's not just a personal excitement. As we noted last week, the Torah itself makes it an issue, puts an emphasis on this excitement when you finish an idea in Torah. Famous Gemara that about the Beisim, even a Suda, the Gemara Shel Torah. It becomes a Sudas mitzvah as well, as we know. For example, when one needs a Sudas mitzvah, for example, out of Pesach or any other time, and the 9 days that pass naturally, Mashiach is coming, the mamash now, but in the past, the 9 days when one wants to be certain, there's certain basis for leniency when one is involved in a Sudas mitzvah regarding meat, for example. So what classifies as Sudas mitzvah? Not everything classifies as Sudas mitzvah, even though it's a Suda which is associated with a mitzvah. For example, Sudas bar mitzvah, even though we know it's an important Su'udah, for that matter it says in Zayar that one should consider it is like an hilula, like a wedding, and it's a lot spoken about this. And again, the parallel, the comparison of that Sudas of a bar mitzvah to a wedding, but nonetheless, categorically, it's not a Sudas mitzvah. Interesting enough, a bris milah is a Sudas mitzvah. A siyum, the Gemara Shel Torah, siyum of a Masechta is considered a Sudas mitzvah. So that's the emphasis Torah itself gives into this very excitement, if you will, of concluding a Masechta. Now, concluding Likutei Amarim is something definitely worth to point out and even celebrate. Especially when we mentioned a few times that within Tanya itself, Likutei Amarim is the and when you say Tanya, it's namely Likutei Amarim, even though in the Sefer Tanya there's the 5 Sfarim. We spoke about this quite a few times. The Likutei Amarim Shar Yichud B'Emunah, which will be, as Hashem, this is what we're going to continue with, as Hashem, in the next class, Habaleinu L'Teva. Then Igeres HaTshuva, Igeres HaKodesh, and Kuntres Sachem. But we say Tanya, it's named Likutei Amarim. So this is where there's so many myriads of classes to come to the end of the Tanya. It's something very worthwhile to point out and even celebrate. So we're holding on the bottom of 148, V'zeu Shamra Yenuka, which is the last line of 148 in the original text. You can see it in the corresponding English text. And as we point out, to see the information of this the previous classes, it's a click away. And we point this out all the time because as much as we like to get into the class which recapping the previous class, but we always have to do this minimally. It's just because it's just easy, literally easy. It's a second click away, a click on the website, which is, you might be watching on different sites, but the original site is the TanyaOnline.com website. As we mentioned, especially for the newcomers, it's easy to follow the classes based on the setup of the website. That there's a separate scroll bar for the text, and as such, it's easy to follow, simply easy to follow. And then also, not only the previous classes, for that matter, all the classes from the very beginning of Tanya, you have easy access to them on the left side of the website, and it opens up in the same fashion. So we try to again minimize as much as we can on the entry into the class. So basically, the Alter Rebbe in this very chapter points out. Alter Rebbe points out in this very chapter that Mishacharib, or towards, there's an entryway into this, what we're learning today. Mishacharib Beis Hamikdash, Ein Leila Kodesh Baruch Hu David Mishal Allah. When the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the Eibishter has the 4 cubits of halacha, in order that the Shekhinah should be shaded. In other words, the Shekhinah should enter into Elam Asiyah. As Alter Rebbe based this And it builds up on this whole idea from this last three chapters, from the beginning of Perek Nun Aleph. And he explains with that elaborate metaphor, or metaphor that Alter Rebbe elaborates, and again, I don't want to say unusual, unusual, but you see a great expansion within the mashal itself, that the nefesh comes into the system of the person dafka through the nerve system, through the brain. And without the brain, the nefesh is completely abstract. Before it enters, there's nothing of the details which we know of the body, the cognitive faculties, the emotional faculties, vision, audio, doesn't exist in the nefesh. The nefesh is separated from that. But when it comes into the body, then obviously it takes it starts forming itself. It takes its position, meaning to say there's a chayis, which is a life, an energy coming from the nefesh into any all these faculties, talents, faculties, kayches, and so on. But that's only when it enters into the system of the person. But what's the entry? In other words, the interface between the nefesh, which is abstract from many details, to come into a body which it's all about details, and it's all about distinctions and differences between one kaych and another. That the interface would be the meichin, the brain, the nerve system. That's the way the nefesh comes in via the brain. As we know, again, the nerve system is not just, it's much more than a vital organ. That's the way the nefesh comes in, and via that the nerve system, the brain, it ultimately is manifest and is mechaya the entire body. It gives chayas and it gives energy, and again in a very specific manner, right? Ayin lira is in lishmeya. It's not just a general chayas, throws just a sense of life or energy of life throughout the body, and everybody picks up whatever they can. No, it's a detailed chayas, a very articulate, detailed chayas, which goes into the eyeball is one type of energy, another to the audio, to the ear is another type of energy, and so on. But it goes through. It has to start. It goes through the nerve system of the brain. So the Alter Rebbe says that in every single Eilam, again you can see it in detail in the previous classes, on this very chapter and the previous chapter, which is the nimshal, the message of this metaphor, compared to the metaphor that the Eibishter enters every Eilam through the Kodesh HaKadoshim of the Eilam, through the holy shrine, which is the Chabad of them. He calls the Chabad the Kodesh HaKadoshim for the reasons he explains there, which is the Chabad is the Chochma Bina Das, the brain, so to say, of the Eilam, which is Chochma Bina Das of that Eilam, just like the Nefesh enters into the system through the Chabad, through the Chochma Bina Das, through the brain system, the nerve system, and that's the way it comes, is manifest throughout the entire body. So the Elokus comes into the Eilam through the Kodesh, through the Chabad of that Eilam, Chochma Bina Das of that Eilam. It's called the Kodesh HaKadoshim of that Eilam. And then there's another Eilam, which is Eilam Abriya, so it has to go through Chochma Bina Das, no, it's the way it functions in Eilam Abriya. So to Eilam Asiya, and so on and so forth. So and when we had the Beis Hamikdash, the Lukus came through the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Lukus came through the Holy Orin, which in the Orin there was the Torah. And that is the brain, if you will. That is a nerve system. That is the original container which the air can come through and ultimately manifest throughout the entire Eilam. And Alter Rebbe explains the difference of the first Bayis, the Bayis Rishon, the first Beis Hamikdash, second Beis Hamikdash, as you can see in the previous classes. And then there is the Mishachorav, unfortunately, Mishachorav Beis Hamikdash, when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. What becomes the Kodesh HaKadoshim? What becomes the brain, the nerve system, so to say, that the Elokus, the Eibishter, should come in and have and be Mahava, Mechayim, Mekayim, in other words, function in Eilam Asiyah. So he says that's the 4 cubits of Halacha. And Alter Rebbe goes on why he emphasizes the Asiyah dimension, and why the Asiyah dimension when he speaks about the Hislapshus, Malchus Datzilus, Malchus Debri, Yitzira Va'asiyah. Again, this last part is a bit cryptic, if you will, or you have to see it. Put it this way: you have to see it, you have to learn it. What the emphasis over here towards the end of the last class, or it was a center point within the last class and the end of the previous class as well, to understand where the Alter Rebbe is saying how it has to, because it goes through the Asiya. Why the Asiya, the Malchus Asiya? Because the 613 mitzvahs of Torah, the significant majority of them is through maises, through action. He speaks about even those mitzvahs which are performed a more deeper dimension within the person, thought, speech, or even thought, but everything is in the end of the day associated with action. And this is where we left off. That, again, you can see this idea that everything on the end of the day is associated with maise, with action. And he said this, and he concludes the Teyag Mitzvah with the seventh with the Rabbanon is called the Keser, which is the supreme rotzen of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is invested in the Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he brings the Abba Yosad Brato. You have to see this. I mean, you should take time in repeating this whole idea. And therefore, this becomes the conduit through which the Eibishter comes through, Hashem, Elokus. This becomes the place which is the Mokim of the Shechina, through which the Eibishter comes through and not deals with, but makes everything happen on the level of Eilam Asiyah. And now the Alter Rebbe concludes, V'zeu Shomra Yenuko, this is what the Yenuko says, the Neheirei Lo Dad L'Kal Reisha, the supreme light which is ignited on the person's head, this is the Shechina Yitzrich L'Mashcha. You need to oil it. So the Alter Rebbe really gave already an explanation on this Yenuka in Perek Lamed Hey, which you can see it, a fascinating explanation why the whole idea, what is the Beinani, what is the gain of, as the Beinani struggles, as he navigates through his Aveda, or he navigates through Elam Hazeh, with his Avedas Hashem, never able to overcome his Yetzer Hara, he can maintain the status of a Beinani. So apparently it's Laheva V'Larik. What's the point of the Beinani sitting in Elam Hazeh, struggling throughout his life, never making it to the end line, if you will? So he brings this Yenuka, which demonstrates the virtue of the mitzvah itself, the fact that the mitzvah performed, which again, this is what the Beinani is constantly doing. And therefore, because of the great virtue of the mitzvah itself, so it's worthwhile the Beinani to live throughout the entire life in Elam Hazeh doing Torah mitzvahs. But the Alter Rebbe begins in Perek Nun Gimel, L'teis v'zbir b'ayret, of an additional explanation of this Yenuka. So here the Alter Rebbe is Zeu Shamar Yenuka, based on what I began to explain in the beginning of Perek Nun Aleph, where the Alter Rebbe asks the question, what does it mean, the idea of Ashras HaShechina? What does it mean, the dwelling of the Shechina? Isn't the Eibishter everywhere? And now he goes on this whole beer. Yes, there's a place which is the area, or the keli, the container to which the Shechina comes through, to which the Shechina makes an impact, or the Shechina has its function in that very Eilam. It must go through the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the holy shrine of that Eilam, which is the Chacham Bina Das, the intellect, in other words, like the nerve system, the brain, the way it is physically in the Mashal the Alter Rebbe gave that it goes through the Chacham Bina Das of every single Eilam, and in this world, through the Kodesh HaKadoshim, there was the Or and there was the Torah. Which most of it is mitzvahs maisius, he says, again, as we learned last week. So he says, now we can understand, and based on this new explanation, or additional explanation of this, what the Yenuka says, that the Neheira Ilah, the supreme Neheira, the Adlik HaReisha, which shines on the head, this is the Shechita you need to oil. This was the expression of the Yenuka. So what does it mean in this context? Based on everything which was built up from Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, till the end of Nun Gimel, that it must invest, this Shechina invests in the Mishcha, in the oil. You need to oil it. What does it mean you need to oil the Shechina which is Al Reisha upon your head? In other words, the Shechina must enter into anything associated with Chacham Bina Das, just like the Nefesh is manifest in the person's body through the nerve system, through the brain, so too the Shechina needs Chacham Bina Das to enter into that Olam where it needs to function, where it needs to make an impact, rather. It needs to be Mahava Mechayim Mekayim. Everything that exists in that Olam must go through the Mishchas, Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. We know that oil is the Chochmah is called Shemen for a number of reasons. It's called the Shemen Mishchas Kodesh, the holy anointed oil, like it says in Zayar. And what would that be? What was the what is this Chochmah? And again, Chochmah is called shemen for a number of reasons, because shemen is the keli to the air. For example, oil is this which allows the fire to burn, because it has this idea of it has a kayach that it allows the air, in this case the air liki, to burn, which is this is the reason the chochmah b'chlolis, Hashem b'chochmah, the reason why chochmah is a container for lukus, because it has that bittul. It allows a lukus. It's not about itself. It's about drawing something higher. As Alter Rebbe writes, a number of places, the difference of chochmah. Bina chochmah is a mitzias. Therefore, it's not the complete conduit to a lukus. It's not the complete conduit to the Ein Sof. Not the complete container to the Ein Sof. As opposed to chochmah. Chochmah is about self nullification. Just there for it's just there to allow the higher energy and the higher purpose to be manifest. Famously, the Alter Rebbe writes in Perek Lamed Hey, Kasher Shemaiti Mimeiri, that Chochmah is the keli for Ein Sof, because Chochmah is about bittul. It's just there to allow something higher to come in. This is one of the reasons why Shemen is called Chochmah, because just there allows the fire. It's self nullifies itself. It means to say it's self-consumption. Just allow the fire to ultimately burn on top of it, which is again one of the reasons Chochmah is called Shemen. Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. So when we speak about the Shemen Mishchas Kodesh, which is the Chochmah, what type of Chochmah are we talking about? We're talking about this Chochmah, which is the Chochmah of Ein Sof. Hu v'Chochmah sei echad. Hu ritzeinim Chochmah sei echad, which is about the completion of Torah mitzvahs. This is the Chochmah. This is the Shemen Mishchas Kodesh, and this is the Itzrich L'mashcha. The Elokus will not come in without the observance of Torah mitzvahs, because Torah mitzvahs is the Shemen. Torah mitzvahs is the Chochmah, the Chabad, as we mentioned, to which allows the cognitive faculties, which means the nerve system, the brain. This is the entryway. This becomes the container through which the air, just like the nefesh comes into the brain, the nerve system, so too the lukus will come dafka into Eilamis, or in that particular Eilam, precisely, and in this case into Eilam Hamaisa and Eilam Asiyah, this very physical world, through the 613 mitzvahs, because that's the Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is relates directly to which we concluded last week, why the Alter Rebbe in other words, the Alter Rebbe, before he goes with Zesh Kos Vayinuka, points out that the idea of Maisa, everything connected to Maisa, but he says in the end of the day, this is the Ratzon HaElyon, this is Hu V'Chochmasei, Ritzeini Echad, this is the Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which represents the Ritzeini Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which ultimately presents Hu, the Ein Sof itself. So he says, Ve'inin Avdin Tovin, this Chochmah, this is the good deeds, Tayag Mitzvah Mishachas V'Chochmasei Baruch. The 613 mitzvahs which come from the Eibishter's wisdom. In order that the light of the Shechina should be held onto the wick. Just like the physical fire, there's the fire, there's the wick, and there's the oil. And each one is dependent really on the other. The fire is dependent on the oil is dependent on the wick, but each one has its function which allows the fire to burn nicely. The wick without the oil would just be consumed. You need the oil in order that the fire should continue to burn. And in this case, what is the wick? The wick is the animal soul, which this is the whole punchline, this is the whole point of Torah mitzvahs, that the Ein Sof should penetrate and transform the animal soul to be less animalistic, to be more, starting from the idea that the animal soul should be more domesticated, should become domesticated, in other words, and less animalistic, and ultimately transformed to a conduit to a lukus, v'ahavtas Hashem lekecha, like it says in Torah and explained in the end of Barachas, v'ahavtas Hashem lekecha b'chol levavcha. That he serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chol levavcha, as the Gemara Lashon of the Mishnah, b'chol levavcha, it's a plural expression, mishnei yitzarecha, that the Yitzhar Hara should also be transformed from a foe to an ally. That it should also start loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from an adversary to an ally. So the psila, which is the nefesh bahamis, that is ultimately meant to be touched by the Ein Sof, in the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How is it touched? How does it continue to burn? Because when there's oil. And when there's oil, that is when there's oil, that is the kima Torah mitzvahs. Because the Torah mitzvah is the chochmah shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's this nehera ilah dadlik al reisha, this Ein Sof, which is upon the Yid, yitzrich l'mashcha. It needs the Shem Mishchas Kodesh, it needs the oil in order that it should have an impact on the wick, which is the nefesh bahamis, the animal soul. Shani kris psila, which is called the wick, al derech mashal kikimeshu b'nei ragashmi, just like in a physical candle. Ha'oir meir kilein midei kilein yisesh v'zapsila pechas la'eish, which part of the way the candle burns is that the wick is burnt, and the wick is consumed into the might of the fire. So if you don't have the oil, nothing happens. There's no fire, there's no nothing, there's just a quick consumption of the wick. But that's not the point, because then you don't have any fire. Then you don't have any fire burning. Then you don't have any fire which is penetrating. And the point of everything is that the Eid Eliki should penetrate the Nefesh Bahamis. The Nefesh Bahamis should be completely transformed, not negated, but transformed. So if you don't have the oil, it's negated, it's burnt up. But the Eibishter wants the Elikus to penetrate Elam Hazah, starting from the Yid himself, his own Nefesh Bahamis, should be penetrated with the Eid Eliki, that the Nefesh Bahamis should be transformed into Elikus. Not a negation, and not negating the Nefesh Bahamis, but the Nefesh Bahamis should start loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Eid Eliki must penetrate. But yes, in the end of the day, you look at the wick is shorter after the fire extinguishes. Then, or as it goes on, it becomes shorter, because in the end of the day, the wick is consumed into the fire. But not consumed in a way that it completely loses itself in the onset, but no, the Eid Eliki is penetrated, the part of the wick starts consuming into the fire. In this case, the Nefesh Bahamis is not negated, but it starts consuming in the context that the Eid Eliki, the godly Eid, made an impact on it, that it's able to transform itself and start loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he says that, so there's the Sreifas Apsila, there's truly the burning of the wick, and a Peches L'Eish, which is transformed to fire. Again, precisely in this manner, with the oil. So too the light of the Shechina dwells over the Nefesh Elikis, through the consumption of the Nefesh Bahamis. Through the transformation of darkness to light, and from bitterness to sweetness, bitzadikim on the far extreme, or by beinanim in the way the beinani serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, if you notice over here, he says the Eid Ashchina Sheida al Nefesh Elikis wasn't the message that he Sheida Nefesh Bahamis. No, but it ought to go through the Nefesh Elikis. And the Nefesh Elikis, the Eid Ashchina shines on the Nefesh Elikis through the kiloyin of the Nefesh Bahamis. In other words, that the Eid Ashchina comes onto the Nefesh Elikis through this oil, which is really the very natural practice of Nefesh Elikis, to do what Hashem wants, because it's a chelik l'kami mal mamash. So we naturally want to do what Hashem wants. In other words, that's the whole point of the Nefesh Elikis, that it connects itself to Torah through Torah mitzvahs. But yet the oil itself is not enough. This Ashras Ashchina on the Nefesh Elikis needs the psila, just like a person is going to never be able to succeed to light a beautiful fire just with the fire and the oil. You need the wick in order that oil should be impactful, and to allow the candles to shine. So too, Alter Rebbe says that the Eid Ashchina does not dwell in the Nefesh Elikis only through the consumption of the Nefesh Bahamis, and through the transformation of the Nefesh Bahamis from darkness to light, and from bitterness to sweetness, which is, again, this is other words of saying about transformation, not negation, but transformation. Now, so he starts through the optimal service, which is the tzaddikim, which they completely transform the Yetzer Hara to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'li bichol b'kirvi, the Alter Rebbe brings the Lashon b'David HaMelech in the first chapter of Tanya, and he explains that this is what it makes the tzaddik, that he completely transformed the Nefesh Bahamis, transformed the Yetzer Hara, ein Yetzer Hara, or at least l'pachas le'dekiloy l'vushash machshav dibur ma'aseh, or at least Aveda the Beinani, that deep down, or he has the insane potent Yitzhara, perhaps even through his entire lifetime, This is the life and the avoid of the Beinani, that it was not even impacted at all. In other words, it wasn't completely removed, and the only removal and the only triumph of the Nefesh Elikis of the Nefesh Bahamis is over the levushim, the garments of the Nefesh Bahamis, that it should never succumb to this animalistic action, speech, or thought, but constantly dominated by the thought, speech, and action of the Nefesh Elikis, even though the core of the Nefesh Bahamis still stands in full tact and in full potency, as the Alter Rebbe defines famously, and again in the Perokim of Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet, where the Alter Rebbe invests in articulating what the Beinani is, that the total dominance, in other words, namely the dominance of the Nefesh Elikis of the Nefesh Bahamis, is Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh, it's in the Levushim, it's in its garments, thought, speech, and action. So, but nonetheless, if it's dominating the Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh of the Nefesh Bahamis, if it's dominating the thought, speech, and action, the garments of the Nefesh Bahamis, so generally, the garments of the Nefesh Bahamis is also being consumed into the fire of Nefesh Elikis, in the Nefesh Elikis. If not the entirety of the Nefesh Bahamis, but at least the Levushim, there's the Kiloin of the Levushim, which Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh. Of thought, speech, and action, and their transformation. From the darkness of Klipos, which again, Chas v'Shalom, would be expressed, would come about if the Nefesh Bahamis would able to express its action and its speech and its thoughts associated with the Nefesh Bahamis. But now there's a complete and total dominance from the Nefesh Elikis over the Nefesh Bahamis, at least in Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh. So there's a complete transformation of the thought, speech, and action of the Nefesh Bahamis from Cheshech HaKlipos, from the darkness of Klipos, to the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch HaMelubash Miyuchad, which is invested in united in one with Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh Shatiyag Mitzvah Torah, which is the thought, speech, and action of the Nefesh Elikis, the garments of the Nefesh Elikis, Shatiyag Mitzvah Torah, but of the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah, which Alter Rebbe explained clearly in Perek Dalet of Tanya, that this is the way, in the end of the day, a person is able to fulfill his Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh, for that matter, namely with his levushim, namely with his garments. The Alter Rebbe explains that it's the Ma'aseh Dibur Machshava, the way the person completes Torah mitzvahs, less the inner sensations of the Nefesh Elikis articulated in Perek Gimel. So with this dominance of the Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh, of the Beinani, of the Tayag Mitzvah Torah, his thought, speech, and action of the Nefesh Elikis, this itself is the image of the transformation of that thought, speech, and action of the Nefesh Bahamis to Elokus, the transformation from the darkness of Klippa to the Eid and Sof, to the Eid Hashem, to the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, as we can perfectly understand. The Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh of the Nefesh Bahamis would express it would express itself in a way that it's contrary to the Ratzon Hashem, which is about Cheshech HaKlipos. The Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh of the Nefesh Elikis is about the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the fulfilling of Torah mitzvahs. So when you have that constant dominance of the thought, speech, and action, Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh of the Taryag Mitzvah Torah of the Nefesh Elikis, so that itself is the scenario, is the scenario of a transformation of the Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh of the Nefesh Bahamis to Elokus. So by the tzaddikim, it's in the entirety, the entire Nefesh Bahamis is transformed. By the Beinani, it's the Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh, as the core of the Nefesh Bahamis stays in full tact. Again, described by Alter Rebbe, illustrated by Alter Rebbe when he describes it to the Beinani. But there is also, but here you also have that hisapcha, the transformation of that psil, of that wick. Bebeinim by a beinim, as opposed to tzaddikim. Because through this aveda, the transformation of the animal soul, which comes from klipas nega, from that level of klipa again, even though it's not shalosh klipas atamayis, but nonetheless klipa it still is, which is again the makeup of the nefesh bahamis. So as Alter Rebbe explains, the chapters right after Dalit, in Vav and Zayin and so on, because through the transformation of nefesh bahamis, namely starts in Vav, this beer, this explanation that Nefesh Bahamis comes from Klipas Nega, but through you transform the animal soul, which comes from Klipas Nega, from Chashechel and Neheda, from darkness to light, Nasa B'chinas Allah Asman. This establishes a elevation of man. And we spoke about this in the past, which is generally to say this a lot. This establishes an arousal from below. What does he mean, arousal from below, in the context of Allah's man? So man, Again, we mentioned in the past, we need not to elaborate on this. Man is mayin nukvin. There's mad and man. Mayin nukvin and mayin duchrin. Nukvin is the feminine waters. Mayin nukvin is the feminine waters. Mayin duchrin is the masculine waters. So just like there is the call and the indication from the nukva to the zachar, in order that the zachar, just like for that matter, it's begashmias, the connection of the tchar and nukva, the connection of zachar and nekeva, there's the call, there's the indication of the nukva to the zachar for the subsequent connection. So too, Am Yisrael is called the Isha, the Eibishter is called Ish. So any arousal from below draws the arousal from on high. Or better yet said, the arousal from on high from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Tchar, which is the Ish, the masculine, is usually comes about solely when there is the arousal from below, when there's an interest, when Am Yisrael calls upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's when the Eibishter in turn comes and is manifest among Am Yisrael. And in detail over here he said, this whole experience of the transformation of the Nefesh Bahamis, and that, for that matter, that's what's called the Mayin Nukvin, the Halah of the Mayin Nukvin, the feminine waters, and then the Hamshacha, the drawing of Mayin Duchrin, of the masculine waters, the Hamshacha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he says this whole transformation of the Nefesh Bahamis, which comes from Klip and Cheshach and is being transformed from darkness to light, that is the Allah Asman. That is the arousal from below, lahamshich eir hashchina, to draw the light of the Shechina, which is the Gilir Yimtzah Baruch al Nefesh Elikis, the revelation of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the Nefesh Elikis, on the godly soul. So the Alter Rebbe first speaks about it in the context of the way the flame is being burning. That you have to have the flame, that you have to have the oil, and each component is essential on its own. And then there's the wick, and then through the oil, the wick slowly is transformed, slowly burns into the fire. Which is, again, this becomes an important, essential point, that not the wick is just burnt up in a way that you're just negating the wick, but the whole point is the Eid Eliki should penetrate the wick, penetrate the Nefesh Bahamis. There should be the Hishabcha, and you see again, when he speaks about the Tzaddik or the Beinani, he emphasizes about Hishabcha. It's about not negating, but the transformation. That the Yitzhahara should also start loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's about the transformation of the Cheshach to Eir, not the negation of Cheshach. But this becomes, so this naturally through the oil and through the wick, that's where you have the fire burning. And that's, again, it really before this last part, it makes perfect sense as well. Now we understand the Yenuka. This Nahira needs the Chochmah, needs the Shema Mishchas Kodesh, needs Teda, observance of Teda mitzvahs, in order that it should shine. Granted, this is good enough when you speak about the image of the candle, of the burning fire in the context of the Yenuka, which explains perfectly the Yenuka with this Taisvus beer, which is with this additional explanation over what he writes in Lepedek Lamed Hey, which is an explanation on its own, which it's an extremely vital message, which the Alter Rebbe takes from that very Yenuka. But the Taisvus beer, everything explained perfectly over here in this context, the way the Alter Rebbe builds up from the beginning of Nun Aleph with that mashal to Nun Beis, Nun Gimel, and again ending, explaining that, in other words, finding the message of the Yenuka in that very message, perfectly appreciated and understood. And here the Alter Rebbe says, now, just we'll step out of, so to say, the image of the flame of the fire. This in itself, we can understand this in the context of Allah's man drawing the Hamshachas Mad. The arousal from below, drawing the arousal from on high. It fits in perfect. Again, it's not separate, it's not exclusive to each other, but it just brings in, fuses these two ideas together. This becomes the Allah's man, to draw the Eira Shechina, which is the revelation of the Ein Sof al Nefesh Elikis Shemamechin. That the Lukus should be drawn, the Nefesh Elikis Shemamechin, it's essential that there's Allah's man. Like the entire relationship of Am Yisrael and the Eibishter, Am Yisrael be called an Isha, and the Eibishter be called an Ish. And then just like again, there's the Mayin Nukvin, the call of the indication of the Nukvin, the arousal of the Nukvin in order to bring the attention of the Tchar, so too And in any time there's the Gilui of Ein Sof Baruch Hu on in general, Eilumus in general, and in this case particularly Nefesh Elikis, is always accomplished through a need, so to say. It's essential in this relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael, similar to the relationship of Inisha V'Nisha. It always needs a Mayin Nukvi. It always needs the arousal from below. So the Alter Rebbe said, this is the arousal from below. This is this transformation of the Nefesh Bahamis to Neheira, Mechashecha, from darkness to light. This is the arousal from below, which draws the Eid Eliki to shine on the Nefesh Elikis. Shememechin Shebereishe, which is in the Mechin of the person's head. Experiencing Teda Mitzvahs, living a life of Teda Mitzvahs, which this is the Shema Mishchas Kodesh. And this we understand. With this we understand thoroughly. Is what it says. That Hashem, your God, is a consuming fire. This is a pasuk in Torah. So obviously, we can appreciate on the simple level that Hashem Elokus is a fire, and it's appreciated in so many different levels. But the Alter Rebbe says, with this, we can understand, learning these perakim, generally Tanya, and learning these perakim, learning the importance, again, the lukus being compared to fire, the way the fire comes on the wick, through the oil, through the wick, through the whole process of the oil being consumed into the fire, the wick being consumed into the fire. And this becomes the ultimate purpose, that a lukus comes down the mata, down here into this world, starting from the Nefesh Elikis, and then impacting, or together with that, impacting the Nefesh Bahamis, and eventually the entire world. So now we can understand why it's about not only a gili revelation of Ashpa and so on. When we're referring to the Eid Eliki, we're referring to the Elokus, which is manifest on the person's nefesh, in the person's life, ultimately impacting the Nefesh Bahamis, ultimately impacting the entire world, transforming the world, making it a dir b'tachtenim. It could be called and defined in so many ways, but now we can understand, based on everything we learned, why it's called Eish, why it's called fire. Because this is the system, this is the way it works. It needs the oil, it's the lukus comes down on the Nefesh Elikis through the consumption of the wick. It's that image which transpires, which justifies, or explains rather, why lukus is called the consuming fire. Precisely with this backdrop, or precisely with this message, is the consumption of the Nefesh Bahamis and its transformation to a lukus, and it's connecting to the Eid Eliki, and so on and so forth, illustrated in this very final page of Tanya. It's explained elsewhere. Nishlam chelik rishen. We conclude the first pedic of the first part, the first sefer of Tanya. B'estes Hashem, with the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yizborich v'Yizborich. The Alter Rebbe concludes in this nishlam, in other words, in establishing kind of the siyum, the words that he concluded the first pedic, with the help of Hashem. May he be blessed. May he be blessed. With this we conclude, and we look forward, Be'ezus Hashem, and thank you all for joining all this time, and we look forward, Be'ezus Hashem, in the coming class, Habo, Leinu, L'Teva, V'Libracha, the very unique study of the Shayich B'Emunah, or the study of the unique second part of Tanya, Shayich B'Emunah, which is on its own, unique is an understatement, because it brings about the ability that a Yid in Elam Hazeh to appreciate and to understand, and ultimately to make a lukus real and tangible in his life, appreciating the reality of Hashem Elikim, that everything is Hashem and Hashem is everything. The message of Ein Eid Milvadei, that nothing else exists other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not in a slogan or in words or even reciting a pasuk in Torah, but really making it real to the human being in a way that it becomes truly palpable and tangible in the life of the human being. Because Be'ez Hashem, we look forward in this coming class, beginning the Shayich B'Emunah. Have a wonderful night.